Hey everybody, welcome to ProducerHax, a game dev podcast where me and my buddy Billy talk about games, the games industry, Twitch, streaming, hot topics, kind of whatever you guys question us or throw stuff at us, we'll answer, we'll try to anyways. I need to really nail down what this intro is.
Yeah.
So I just nail it each time.
Someday.
But yeah, so we're going to do Crunch today. We're going to talk about Crunch. We're not
I don't
crunching.
want to crunch today. I don't
Big
want
hot topic in the industry. Tons of articles coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much unanimously against it, except for one.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about him, yeah.
But other than that, I guess we'll start as usual, or we'll start as how I want to start usually now. Billy, what were you playing last week, and what do you plan on playing this week? What games are out? What are you doing? What's awesome?
So it's a short intro for me this week because I didn't stream a whole lot this past week. I was busy with work, doing a lot of things, a lot of late nights.
Crunching?
Touches a bit on the crunch topic. Not what we often think about as crunch, but we'll get into a bit more detail on that.
Yep.
But last night I was able to finally get back online, do a bit of streaming, played Battleborn, played a bit of Doom 2 actually, because we're getting ready for Doom to come out next week, or I guess this coming Friday, I believe. A bit of a weird launch because they're on Friday instead of a Tuesday.
Wait, they're launching on Friday?
They're launching on Friday, which I thought was strange. Yeah, on the 13th. So yeah, I know that just threw me off too.
I thought the 13th was a Tuesday.
Nope. The 10th. The 10th is the Tuesday, and that's Uncharted 4. So that's what I'm also prepping for tonight. I'm gonna probably. We'll see.
I love that they're launching on a Friday.
Yeah, I like that too. I think more games need to start doing that going forward.
Oh, yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
That's
another topic.
Yeah, exactly. We will talk about launching a game. I think that'll probably be next week's topic,
sure.
Just because there's gonna be a big group of big name titles coming out next week.
Mega big games.
Big games, and what it means to launch a big title, right? So, but for this past week, yeah, it was a lot of work, late nights, and again, just not necessarily crunch, but crunching, so to speak. And then played Battleborn. I had a lot of fun with that last night, playing with a couple buddies. So
this looks like a game that I do not want to play whatsoever.
I wasn't really sold on it when they first announced it, and then I saw a couple streams of it during the beta, and I was like, yeah, that might have my attention. It was a lot of fun to play last night. It's like a 4-player dungeon crawl. It's got a MOBA mode, which we did terribly at, but yeah, it looks really fun. So it's MOBA for the console, right? So how about you? What were you doing this week?
We played Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
I only got 5 bosses left, so we're going to finish that up on Tuesday. It is still an absolutely amazing game.
Yeah, I've enjoyed watching that. I've got to get it.
It's such a game dev game. I find it's very not targeted at game devs, but I can see why game devs are like, oh man, I love the simplicity and all this kind of stuff about
very
it.
simple. It's the player's fault when they die, right? It's
yep.
it's very mechanics driven. It's very gameplay driven. That's my thing right now.
It's the game punishes you, not the game is unfair.
Yes, it punishes you for you not adapting to the gameplay, right? Which I think is awesome.
So that's it's awesome. Tonight we're gonna play. We're gonna finally finish Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time.
Yeah.
That awesome co-op game. What else are we doing? We got food on Monday, and then Tuesday, doing something super awesome on my channel. Finishing Dark Souls 3, but we're also, I don't know, something's going on. Check it out. Something crazy.
If you guys like the graphics and the overlay that you see here for ProducerHax, also on my channel right now, the same amazing artist, Captain Twaz, has done a total rebranding for Mr. The Fids here.
What?
So
you're giving away the goose, Scander.
Damn it! Damn peaky volume.
Anyways,
all right.
But then, I'm super excited for Doom 3, so we're going to do that on Friday. I didn't know it was launching, but we're going to play on Nightmare mode.
Ooh, hardcore.
And keep the death counter going. See how many deaths we get to defeat Doom, the new Doom. It looks like it's exactly the game I want.
Nice.
It sold me on you're going to hell. You're the only hope for humanity. I'm like, yes, that's me.
And that's what we were enjoying about playing Doom 2 recently. Is it's that throwback, right? It's just like a lot of people talk about Doom as being scary. Doom to me wasn't scary horror. It was scary oh my god, I'm outnumbered.
Yep.
And how do I survive this, right?
It's the difference between Doom, the R Doom, which is 90s Doom, and then Doom 3.
Doom 3, which was the horror style, right? So
which was
cool. It's cool, right? So, so yeah, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today. Last week we wanted to touch on 2 topics.
Yep.
But we kind of finished up one, and we said let's dedicate a whole show to crunch.
Yep.
So yeah, walk us through.
Well, wait, I was going to throw it to you to be like, what's
crunch? Yeah.
Okay. You want to take it?
Yeah. So
you've been in the industry.
I've been for a bit. And I think last week I touched on the fact that I did a fair bit of crunch right out of the gate. That was a thing, and it was great for me because I got into the industry and I was in a city I didn't know. So rather than go out and explore the city, I would do crunch. And it was great because it's a great way to make money at the time. But
Maybe back it up one step.
yeah.
What is crunch?
Yeah, well, what is crunch is this is a tricky one because in a lot of industries, you wouldn't use the term crunch. You'd probably use overtime.
Just overtime.
And overtime, the reason it's not used in the gaming industry, there's a couple of different ones, but one of them is really that overtime often implies that there's additional pay.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case because a lot of folks in the gaming industry are salaried, which means they, regardless of how many hours you work, you have an annual salary that's paid out to you. This is true of a lot of like doctors, lawyers. A lot of like professions have this exact same concept, right?
Yep.
It's like you are paid a certain amount for your year of service. How many hours you put into that is dependent purely on what you're trying to achieve.
Getting
right? Getting your job done, right?
Yep.
Exactly. Now, there's a lot of reasons for crunch, and we'll get into that in a moment. But crunch really is that idea of if you got to get something done and you're running out of time. A lot of the ways you solve that is working more hours essentially. Yep. And sometimes that looks like evenings, sometimes it looks like weekends, sometimes it's both.
Yep.
Ideally any project has no crunch, but that's been a very tough goal for the industry to hit since its inception. It's getting a bit better. There's a lot of different things we can talk about
better,
today.
but it's also getting worse.
Exactly. I think there's different understandings of it, and we're going to talk about, I think, largely from the perspective of AAA dev, because that's what we know.
Yeah.
But I think we've got some points here about what it looks like for an indie dev.
Yeah.
Or and we have some indie dev friends.
Small studio.
Yeah.
And we got indie dev friends that have told us about some stuff. So.
Yeah. Exactly. So.
That is crunch is overtime, but not overtime.
Yes.
Unpaid.
Think about it as just additional time to get the game or the project done that wasn't originally planned for essentially is probably the best way to kind of encapsulate it. So
yep. It's I don't know. It's such a so the overtime idea makes a lot of sense to me. So say you're working machine shop.
Yep. And
you guys got to get this order out end of day Friday or this weekend kind of thing. You call a bunch of guys in.
Yep.
And you ship it, right? Like you go in for the weekend, you're like, no, we got to get this order out Monday because they're depending on us and they're a good customer to us. And so we got to make sure we deliver those goods. Or you're a delivery driver and it's 5:00. You could just go home, but it's like, oh no, I love that customer.
Yeah.
Building a good relationship with them. So I'll do that. And usually it's a very specific, very, very small one-time kind of thing in every other industry. The problem with what's referred to as crunch or overtime in games is that it is for hugely extended periods of time.
Can be, yeah. Absolutely.
Can be, yeah. So there's varying degrees, but it's like, so there's the Death March crunch.
Yeah, that's I think the one most people have heard about, right? Yeah.
Then there's like maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks crunch, which is awful as well.
Yeah.
But then there's like what I consider like overtime stuff, which is crappy, but sometimes it's like, no, I got to get this video out. I'm just gonna stay tonight, and it's a one-time thing. It's like, oh, we have a critical bug, we need to get this thing fixed today.
Exactly.
Can you please stay like an hour, 2 hours, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is totally understandable. It's we didn't hit our level goals.
Yes.
Because of 17 reasons. It doesn't matter what they are. I need the team now to work every single day.
Yeah.
Breakfast to 10 p.m. for 6 months, which is just
those are the killers.
Bananas.
Yep. Those are the killers.
I guess the little one-off bug fixes I don't think is
those happen.
Those happen, and they happen in every industry. They happen, and that's the kind of overtime stuff, which I don't think anybody's really bothered by.
No.
And usually, if somebody's like, well, no, I can't stay late tonight, there's always like, 50 other people like, oh yeah, for sure, like I'll take one today. Like it's cool. I didn't have any plans tonight or that kind of stuff. Like we're always super lean on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or at least Bioware has always been, I felt. But it's so maybe first talk about the medium level of crunch. Why would you ask somebody, or why would you ask your team to stay for 2 weeks from like 5 hours after work kind of thing, right? Like, I don't, because there's lots of studies that come out and they're like, no, you can get like 1 week of crunch or overtime does show an increase in productivity.
Yep.
And then every day after that shows a drastic decrease in
There's
productivity.
diminishing returns, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's and that's the one that the industry's struggling with right now. Is that you see, and that okay, if I work 10 hours today, yeah, 2 to 4 hours to your day, you're gonna get a little bit more done, right? And especially if you're in a groove, you're gonna get more done.
Yep.
It's when you start to do that repeatedly, you fatigue and you get sloppier, and you aren't as sharp as you normally would be, right?
Yep.
And a lot of disciplines, I see Jeff in the chat. I can only imagine what that is for a programmer or an engineer that has to be on the ball of like how they're
Or an
coding,
artist
right?
trying to be creative.
Exactly, right? And if you have to work at your peak, but you're fatigued, that starts to show up over time, right? And you're not doing your best work anymore. And I think that's the demoralizing problem of like, not only are you, away from what other things you do outside of work, but it's now you're like, oh, I'm not doing my best work, and I know it, and it's fatigue driven, right?
Yeah, and it just starts this vicious cycle
Yeah.
of not quality work, but
Yeah.
also now it's affecting my home life, which in
Yes.
turn obviously affects my work, because if you have a stressful time at home, you're going to come into work stressed out, and it just keeps on getting worse.
Keeps going,
and worse.
right? It's a spiral. Yeah. So
It's a yeah, crunch is like, I think if you have to ask your team to crunch, that is an absolute failure of production.
yes, and I think that's the thing you see a lot of in the articles right now of and going back to like the original question of what gets like medium crunch is what we'd call it, I guess. Medium crunch of like the 2 weeks to finish something. Game development's often broken down to milestones or deliverables, and sometimes that's over a period of weeks, months, even a year maybe. Some combination of that time span and what you're aiming to deliver. A lot of times the one that you hear a lot about in games is like an alpha or a vertical slice. It's all the features, beta, exactly, right? Sometimes it's a smaller chunk, and it's we're gonna get this feature done by this time, and you get most of the way through there, and then you go, oh, we're not trending, right? Like, we've missed a few things. A lot of the times it's because our acceptance criteria of like what we were aiming for maybe wasn't clear enough. Someone delivers it, or it was very clear, you deliver it, and then you get your hands on it, you're like, yeah, it's not where I thought it would.
Yep.
When I envisioned it, it was gonna be here. We ended up a little bit over here.
Or even things that, so there's quality or
Yep.
fun concerns that could change. Obviously, it's iteration games,
Yes.
but it's also the tools are broken.
Yep.
Or you didn't have a build for a week because there's been
Instability,
critical bugs or whatever.
You integrated some tech and it just something fell apart, right? So game development's very much like a house of cards. It's you pull one piece and everything could topple. It's very delicate. You have a lot of people in AAA right now. A lot of teams are 200, maybe even more on a project, and anybody's putting all their content into the build at the same time, especially when you're getting a build ready. It tends to come together at the last second, right? It's like, everybody push it all in at the same time, and it's like this thunderdome of like what tramples what, because everybody's got a little bit different version of the build on their machine when they submit. And we see it all the time. Like, we are like, yeah, all right, cool, we got this awesome build, and then the build kind of tanks for like a week after as the instability comes in. You're like, oh god, all these amazing features are in, but like it just falls apart. Like, E3 demos are. I remember ages and ages ago a FIFA 06 FIFA demo that like took the team offline for almost a week after that, just to try to repair the things you do to make that demo stand up, and then like, you have to undo all the duct tape, so to speak, to put it back together for real. So
that's why there's such a push to make sure that demos are legit, true content. At least with where we work. Because the cost of it being fake to pull out is unbelievable. Plus, you've now wasted real time work putting fake stuff in. So you're not gonna ship
I've always said, like, one of the things that just like, it's a bit of a tangent, but it's totally related, is that you see someone like Kojima back in the day, whenever he'd do like a Metal Gear demo, and you're like, by the time you played the game, you're like, none of that I saw shipped. It was like a totally like a mind f just to try to throw you off, but get you excited about the game. But then by the time you play the game, you're like, that content never was on the disc, or it was like a variant of it. Like, I remember Metal Gear 2, they showed this whole sequence, you never actually saw that in the game. And then you finally played the game, and it was like almost like they had swapped everything. So it was like, okay, all these sequences technically played out, but in a totally different location, totally different place, totally different art. I was like, how much effort was put into that demo, And then can you justify it at the end of like, did it do enough for sales or anything else to make
Did
that
do enough
game
for sales, but did it also
sell?
prove out? There's good things about it. It's
Maybe
like, did it
improve
prove
tech,
out a system,
right? Yeah,
improve tech?
yeah, exactly. And
Maybe,
that's where a lot of that stuff
yeah.
comes out, right? As you stand up a feature, vertical slice is really about that. Make sure everything stands up, and then you go, okay, now we know we have example 1, 2, 3 that system works or doesn't, right? So
yeah. No, and so yeah, related to crunch demos.
yes, demos often play a big part in crunch, right?
Because
Like,
you just want your best quality forward, right?
You need to put, if you're going to show something public, it has to be top notch.
So here's a question then for you. So say somebody's working on a feature, and it's getting put into the build on Friday because you got a demo or you're releasing on Monday or whatever it is, and they want to work late that week. What do you say to them?
It all depends what they're hoping to achieve. We do this a lot where you say,
because a lot of people have like not pet projects, but they want to put their best quality because they're artists,
right?
perfectionists, right?
Exactly, and you don't want to stifle that or hold that back. But at the same time, you do have to be aware of that if someone else is playing and changing things in the build that someone else is dependent on to be somewhat static or in a certain place, if they're moving that, again, it's that house of cards, right? It's like the Jenga block. Someone's moved a block and you didn't realize it because it was on the other side, and then you go pull the other side and you're like, oops, now it all falls apart again. So it really depends on the circumstance, but I know like we do this a lot when we're preparing, for an end of a milestone, end of a demo or something like that. Whether internal or external, you go, okay, we're going to do a build lockdown, essentially, right? Like, there's a phased lockdown where you go, okay, like now we need the programmers to come out. Okay, now we need the artists to come out. Now we need the designers to come out. And it's like this stage. This
and audio's there right till the end.
Yeah, audio and VFX, the poor guys right at the bottom there, right at the end there. Waiting for everybody else to kind of finish up so they can go put their final touches in the mix and everything. But this is true of finaling. I think this will be a topic at some point too, is like finaling a project and what that looks like and the Thunderdome that is, trying to get everything in and make it run smoothly. So yeah, it really depends. Like sometimes someone will say, and this is actually the counterpoint that I was kind of touching on last week, was sometimes you want to do crunch. Like, sometimes as producers, we go, guys, I really don't want to crunch you. Or sometimes we go, sorry, guys, we're going to have to crunch because we have to get this thing done. It's critical. Sometimes you've moved a deadline or a piece so far out that you can't move it anymore. It's hitting a wall, essentially. If you move it any further, you're actually going to topple everything else behind it, right? There's dependencies and there's roadmaps that others need you to hit to. Sometimes though, and this is my case when I first started in the industry, is that you just want to crunch, you want to learn, you want to do things, you want to achieve something. You believe that you can take your content further if you do this. And that's the tough one, because you have a team that's very passionate that wants to do this. And sometimes telling them no is actually the hardest thing. You're like, no, I know you want to do this amazing thing. I totally believe it's going to be amazing. But the risk is the key part there, right? The risk
is too high, or it's even things like, no, that's good enough.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, is at some point you have to say, this piece right
go
here,
of the unicorn.
We've got to do 40 to 50 features, for example. This feature, it's good enough for right now, and we're going to put it back for a bit. We need to move on to the next piece because like it hasn't started, or it's not far enough along, or it has problems that you've identified. You need to go back to it. Now you have the tech to go back to it or whatever. And then maybe you go back to that other one at the end if you have enough time. You never have enough time. There's an old saying that art is never finished, it's ripped out of the artist's hands. And that's absolutely, I'd say 1000% true. I've never seen an example where a team goes, we're absolutely done with this project, we're like, ship it. It's usually there's still someone clinging on for dear life. Like, no, I want it. And
but is your week of going that extra mile and hurting your personal relationships and your health worth the 0.1% quality boost of that one texture on a rock or something?
The diminishing returns and the opportunity cost is usually what it comes down to. Like, you could put another 16 hours into this thing for 0.1 of a Metacritic. And you're like, and we always say Metacritic, but it's like, it's just
quality,
some way of measuring quality or something that comes through, right? So
I think so Starbucks just brought this up, but I think a way to talk about it is why is crunch glorified in game development?
It's I've thought about this a lot, and I'm guilty of doing this at various points in my career, is that it's the Cub Scout badge. It's I did this thing. I survived this horrible thing. And You see this, it's a human condition, I think, of saying, like, you know what, my triumph was that I survived X, survived this death crunch. And or when someone, complains about something, you go, you don't have any idea. When back in my day, like, it's the parent thing, right? Like, yeah, I walked to and from school 18 miles through broken glass, and there's a blizzard every day. And there's blizzards in summer. You're like, huh? But I think there's a bit of that. The glorified component, I think, is largely that, is that almost like this belief that it's a meritocracy, that the more crunches you've been through, that you're more seasoned, you're more experienced. And that's true to a certain degree, but I think, the industry is heading more and more to that place of, get away from that. Don't be proud of the fact that you ruined a relationship. That means, right? Like I know friends that have, like, their marriages literally fell apart. Yeah, they became alcoholics because they're just like, no, like, I was trying to finish this project, my spouse left me, my family's split apart, and I'm an alcoholic now. I'm like, that's not a good thing.
Being proud of crunch is unbelievably silly, because it literally means your project was horribly managed and you're proud of that, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, we had to crunch for 8 months to get such and such out the door, and then we did, and it was a mega success, and we made $bazillion. It's like, well, the devs didn't make $1 billion, but but it also means that your project management team misestimated everything, had terrible schedules, didn't scope down the game under, like, you look at the scope of the game, which is all the features you want to put in, or all the art, or like everything together. It's called scope. And they didn't measure that against the capacity, and the capacity is how much work can the team do in X amount of time, whatever that time is. Time is usually related to when are we releasing. So for releasing in July 1st, we can make 17 features. Well, if your project management team went and looked at, like, well, we have 40, we'll just crunch to get it all done. It's like, you're doing it wrong, and it's not something to be proud of. And I think also why game dev is so focused on this crunch and the glorification of it are two things. One, we were a really young industry, and it was a lot of single young guys and girls, nerds in a basement kind of thing. Teams of 10, working late hours, and you kind of could at that time. Not that it was a good thing, but it was like, oh yeah, no, I don't have family, friends, I don't have kids. Like, my friends are the people in the room with me. We just hang out all the time. Like, we're in my mom's basement. I get the pizza downstairs. Like, that kind of mentality. But as the industry's gotten older, these people are growing up, have kids, have families. Look at the ridiculousness that was working 20 hours or 36-hour stretches. And I've heard stuff like that from the old style devs when they were small companies and stuff. But it was a young industry, and it's also, you hear these stories and they're bullshit of, I crunched, we made, name any mega hit game from a small company. And it's like,
God,
so we crunched our asses off for 10 months, and we made it, and then we released it, and there's only 5 people in the company, so we made like $20 million each, or some like bananas thing like that. For every one of those, there's probably 1,000 that didn't make $1, that lost them a house, that lost them money.
Exactly.
So there's this glorification. It's the rock star or rock band mentality. It's like, that one band, they were just in their mom's basement just being a band, and then they made mega superstars or whatever.
I think that's
like, there was 1,000 other bands that have nothing, and now they're homeless or whatever.
I think that goes down to, like, this is true of a lot of industries. I keep relating it back to, like, lawyers and doctors. I have friends that are in both fields, and I've seen it a little bit in chat right now. People are going, like, it's not necessarily unique to our industry, but, like, when you're first starting to make it, you're very ambitious, right? And we've talked about this in the past, that being very self-driven, self-motivated, self-starter. Trying to tell people of that nature, that personality type, to not give it their all is like the hardest thing in the whole world. Hey, stop being awesome. No, like, and they'll give you the double, like the stone cold double finger, you're out, right? Like, it's not gonna happen. But the funny thing is, a lot of people, and I saw it come up in chat a moment ago, is like, why does it show up more in the industry? I think it's just the game industry gets a little bit more attention.
We're
it's
a
little
very
bit more
public industry.
Exactly, right? But, like, again,
and we're just making games.
We're just making games, right? So it's like, why is it so hard to just make games? I hear this a lot. And Again, like I have, and you see this actually in movies, like where it's obviously dramatized a bit, but
Yeah.
I think it was like the old movie The Firm, way back with Tom Cruise, right? And like he's up to like 5 in the morning, head in hands, in a library in DC somewhere, like sourcing out all the details of like how he's going to crack the case, right? Like that's true. That happens in other industries. We just don't get the public attention on those. Like you don't hear about the lawyer who did it because it's like this super unglamorous case of like, well, he was looking up the backstory of like how this company like cheated on taxes for like 12 years or something like that. Like it's not very, it doesn't make for a great news story, and that, but whereas video games, it is a great news story. One thing I was also going to mention too is to see it happening or showing up in here is that crunch, and we talked about like it is poor management, but does it mean that those people are idiots?
No.
I don't think it does. I think
No.
a lot of that is to do with, again, if you tell a team we got to scope down, we don't have enough room. Now this is usually where you get into a bit of a battle between a DD or a PM. Will say, look, your capacity says you can't do that.
Yep.
But the producer, much like a designer, is often going to go, but I want more.
But I want more.
I want to give
this
more
quality.
to the player. I want this
Yep.
quality bar. I want to do this. I want to have this much content for the fans. You're always trying to advocate for the fans. Everybody is, but to different degrees. And
Yeah.
obviously the PM and DD has the tougher job in a lot of ways of
I think-
being the advocate for the schedule.
I think that's a
But-
huge point you hit. I just want to touch it really quickly before I go back to you. But nobody making games wants to make a bad game.
No,
Nobody
exactly.
on your team wants to make a crappy
Doesn't matter if you're
product.
making like the next big epic or Barbie horse adventures.
Exactly.
You want to make a killer product.
Yep.
Every time.
Otherwise, why are you here? Why like what?
And those people phase out very quickly.
quickly.
I've seen a few that like their heart wasn't in it and they're gone. Like
Yep.
they go find
'Cause
another
it's
industry. They'll make more money. They'll
It's
do
a
whatever.
way
Right?
different
Less time.
type of industry, I guess,
Yes.
than
Yeah.
many other jobs, and it's not for everybody. But that's why it's, and people are talking about it here. I think it's a good point that it is a competitive industry. It's very hard to get in. And so some companies hold that over people's heads
Yes.
of, well, yeah, you're going to crunch,
Yeah.
or we're just going to get those 17 kids waiting outside
Yeah.
to come in and do your job for you.
For every one of you that doesn't want to
There's
do the
100
crunch,
out
there's
there.
100 more back behind you that would kill for this job.
Which
That's
is
great, but
Awful.
Yeah.
It's something that I think it's like we need like a dev union or something, but it's like the devs need to push back on stuff like that, because it's like, no, that's a bullshit thing. But also we shouldn't be an industry where we're so quick to throw. God damn it, Billy, your phone's on. Where we're
we go.
so quick to throw away good employees because they don't want to work a ton of overtime, right?
I heard
Because I've heard stories like that.
Yeah,
It's awful.
I'm personally not a union guy. My wife works for a union and I don't like it, but but I like. I know what you're getting to.
Yeah.
I think that it's being able to stand up for yourself and say what's right, what's wrong. I think we're getting better as an industry on that front. Going back to your point of just like the creatives and again, I think it's part of the youth of our industry is that other industries have fought this battle like as part of like the workplace revolution, like the workforce revolution that happened 100 years ago, right? Like even movies had this like 70 years ago, and then they formed unions, they formed other means of getting this done, but it is really that idea of like there's always someone who's waiting, and I think that's the thing is now the cool thing is kind of what we touched on last week is if you get burnt out on AAA crunch, you can go possibly do indie if you want. The problem is and this is where
indie is
more crunch,
full of crunch too,
even more crunch,
with more risk.
because as I say, like, and this is we got a couple of friends that used to work for Bio, and they're doing the indie thing in town, and you ask them like how many hours of sleep you get, and then it's probably even less than us because it is the lawyer or the doctor thing where you're a self-starter now.
Yeah.
Now you are exclusively responsible for the product. It's not like you have a couple other people you can fall back on. If you have a rough week at a big studio, there's usually someone else who's gonna like pick up slack or help you out. If you're a team of 2, 3, 5 people, one person even, we got a couple friends that I know that are one person building a game and trying to get it onto like Steam early access, Steam Greenlight. You have only so much money, so much time. You probably have a family or someone else, rent, all these other things to account for. Even if you save up a lot of money, say you hit the jackpot, you save up a bunch of cash, you sell all your personal belongings, you got this nest egg here, to chip away at for your project. If you're not disciplined, you're probably going to crunch.
Yep.
You're also probably going to run out of money.
And
Probably going to have to bring in more people. And
dude,
that's
just talking about this kind of popped into my head, which happens all the time for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I got like a borderline ADD at this point. So.
I think that's almost we need to. I don't know. We need to swap, but like the role of the producer, the role of the project manager should be swapping away from get the team to crunch or get the team to hit these dates or whatever. And it's almost like pull it back and no, get the team to not crunch, right? Like get somebody in there to say, no, that's good enough quality.
Yeah.
Or we don't need this feature at that level of polish because nobody's going to see it, or it's just background tech or what, all that stuff's super important too. But there's somebody to come in and be like, nope, move on to the next thing because yes, this crate looks beautiful, but we need like 300 more.
Yes.
So if you spend all the time on one, we can't have one crate in the game. That kind of
exactly. It's gonna be repetitive. It's gonna look worse than if you had 5 or 6 that are different.
Managing the scope and making the scope cuts.
Yes.
Early, I think is important because when you start a project, we want to make everything with 1,000 awesome things and all the everything awesome because we all want to make great, amazing games, and everybody has an amazing idea.
Yeah.
But it's like once again, capacity, scope, time, velocity, all that. PM words, but it gives you like we can get this much work done, and I think we need to, as an industry, get better at like cutting scope earlier.
Yeah, getting focused, knowing exactly what you need to deliver, right?
Iterating, like getting a feature into the game as soon as possible to find the fun for it.
Stand it up,
a lot less.
Stand it up and iterate on it if you can, right?
Yeah, exactly what it is. So. I had a question for you. Oh, no, now it's gone, Billy. Billy, please. Oh, what's the cost of crunch?
Oh, God. It's multiple, right? It's we talked a little bit about it. It's time.
I said the word union, and now it's just
it's blowing up, right?
Shouldn't have said it.
Yeah, it's going to be a trigger. I talk about this all the time with my wife because, like I said, she's part of a union. I can't stand it.
People have different opinions.
Different opinions. It has different values and does different things. So,
what's the cost of crunch to a project, maybe, and then to a dev individually?
So, to a project, you might think, okay, well, money's probably not a big thing because if everybody's salaried, then there's not really a huge change in terms of the budget, other than you're trying to avoid the budget slipping. Are we taking calls? Oh my God, no.
That's the best question. That's something we should think. We should totally get a 1-800 number. Yeah, people can Skype in or something.
We'll talk about maybe getting a Discord on a future.
Well, Patrick, I think you just found some work for you to do. Figure out how to get calls into the stream from now on.
Yeah, we'll probably do something like Discord on future topics when we talk about wanting to have guests. And
we want to. Yeah, but sorry for just. It was
Blair can't be trusted with a screen in front of him.
I had like a huge coffee, and now I'm just like.
I know. I'm gonna crack open. Here we go. This is the effect of crunch, guys. You drink more of this.
You drink more Coke Zeros.
Yeah, drink more Coke Zeros. Clack. There we go.
This podcast brought to you not by
Coke
Zero, even though it's delicious.
It is delicious.
Sorry. So the question was cost of crunch to the project.
Yep.
And then to the dev.
So to the project, again, it's you're trying to offset a certain amount of cost, right? Because you're saying crunch to still hit your deadline, so your budget and your timeline doesn't extend. It stays where it is. Sometimes this is a result of you've delayed. You now hit a wall. There's no further delaying because X, Y, Z. Could be relationship, a dependency. Movie games go through this a lot, right? The movie's going to launch. You can't miss that date,
or you lose half your sales probably.
Exactly. You lose sales, you lose
whatever it is,
marketing dollars, whatever it might be, right? And you need those things to line up to make for a successful product. To the dev, this is what it costs right here. Health is a big part of it.
And that also ties that costs the project too, right? Like
yes. As your health diminishes, if you're tired,
obviously way less.
If you're tired, if you're mentally exhausted, if you're physically exhausted, if you're stressed, all these things play into how you're resting or not resting. When you come back to work next day, are you in a healthy state?
Are you thinking creatively if you're an artist? Or are you thinking about relationships if you're in production or something? Because if you're stressed out and you're hungry and tired, and you come into work and say 9 o'clock in the morning, somebody comes up like, "Oh, this thing's on fire. We got to do something about this thing." What do you think your response is going to be?
If you're cranky, man.
If you're cranky.
Oh, man.
Versus, if you're well rested and like, oh yeah, I'm ready to take on the day. Let's like solve this problem first.
Yep.
That
it changes everything. You're working in a team, right? And you have to remember that like everything that happens to you ultimately cycles back.
Yeah.
And even if you're the most careful person and you go, you know, I try to keep work and life separate, you can do that for so long and eventually it starts to bleed in just because they almost become one and the same. The more you crunch, it is the same, right?
Yep.
There's less and less. The separation really is
there's a bleed.
where I sleep.
Yeah.
So,
there's this talk of work-life balance. It pops up a lot and
yes.
a lot of it's a buzzword kind of thing lately. And so there's a VentureBeat article by Alex St. John, and I think a lot of people may have read this. If you haven't, please go to VentureBeat and read this because it'll make you. Well, it depends. If you agree with it,
wow.
you're a bad person. If you don't agree with it, then you'll be unbelievably
we'll try to
angry.
get some links up afterwards. The show. Yeah,
but it talked
podcast,
about he used a lot of terms of wage slave, like devs are complaining about being a wage slave. All you do is push around a mouse pointer.
Yeah,
and this is somebody who is a game dev and a tech dev for a very long time.
Yes,
and he glorifies.
Yeah,
this is what he brought up. He glorifies crunching for 80 hours, even though. And the funniest thing about this is, he left Microsoft because he was burned out.
Yeah.
And then he says, no, you want to be burned. So anyway,
and to be clear, he left after making millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars. So
he's not hurting for cash anymore.
It costs you so much in creativity relationships, your burnout level, but a response that got posted in VentureBeat by Rami Ismail, an indie dev out in Sweden. He's it's a 2-dev team he works in.
Yeah.
I can't remember the game.
He writes a lot of articles.
Writes a lot of articles.
And everything.
Follow him on Twitter. He's always very poignant. Very good
very
perspective on games.
Yeah.
But he wrote an amazing counterpoint, and he goes line by line.
Yeah.
It's also on VentureBeat, and that is a great article that could explain the rage I think some devs have about the crunch and the glorification of crunch, and why people like Alex need to not be in this industry. But it's so,
or at least not in power.
Not in power in the industry. Yeah. Another one. Fail Better CEO did an interview or an article. Alexis Kennedy, and it's talking about crunch is bullshit. It's like data's in, crunch sucks. You will see if you work a little bit of overtime. This is what we talked about pretty much. You will see a little bit of boosted in productivity.
Yeah.
But then it drastically drops off, and the longer you go, the worse it gets.
It's not sustainable.
And it horribly affects the quality of the project and the quality of your life.
No, absolutely. I think
frustrating.
I think you'd have a very, very difficult time disproving that article.
Yeah, no.
There's so much science that says
so much
science is bad.
So many more articles keep coming out against crunch, obviously, and that's why that Alex St. John article was so infuriating.
Yeah, I think every single... It was funny because I watched Twitter that day. I didn't know about the article because I was working. And then at the end of the day, I saw like half of the studio, more than half of my friends in the game industry on Twitter going like, WTF, who is this clown?
Who is this clown? And then you read his credits.
And then you read his credits and like, oh wow, so you made DirectX, congratulations.
Like,
and you haven't been doing this for forever. He's left a position where he's had to do any crunch for years. And now, years.
One of his questions on interviews is are you ready to work 80 hours?
Yeah.
And it's like, no.
Yeah.
And that brought up a point, actually. Maybe we'll get to questions now, because I think I'm kind of out of ideas to talk more about crunch. I think we hit the points of like, it sucks.
Yeah.
Bad project management, what gets you there.
Yeah.
Ways to get around it is reducing scope. Things like this.
Knowing what you're
planning
better.
Right? Yeah, no, exactly. Knowing how you're trending. But throwing to Cypher of Tears got one. Do you think crunch culture will push a lot of people out of the industry or to go indie or burn out faster? And I think to answer maybe the second part of that is going indie doesn't get away from crunch, as we talked about.
I think in a lot of cases, unfortunately, makes it worse.
And I think crunch culture will push people out of the industry.
Yep.
We see it a lot. People just be like, and I'm never going to make a game again. See you later. They go off to whatever, Sweden, to go
do whatever,
be a snow farmer or something crazy like that. It's just like getting
that purple snow, man. Getting that purple
snow. They're so burnt out that they want nothing to do with tech anymore.
Yes.
But I think almost it should be a big. Did you just slurp your pop?
I slurped it, man.
God damn.
God damn.
it's something I'm starting to get really passionate about, but like changing that culture to get away from crunch. And I think we need more devs pushing to get away from it. I think a lot of them are.
Yes.
People are no longer being like, God, that crunch was bullshit, I'm quitting the company. People are being more like, God, that crunch was bullshit. How do we fix it?
Yes.
Who do we start talking to? How do we start planning differently?
That's the change that's needed, I think, is that when I was younger, I started the industry when I was about 24, 25. So I was actually old-ish by comparison, like, because when I joined at EA Canada in QA, everybody else at the time was like 18, 19. They're coming right out of high school. Some of them were coming out of technical colleges and stuff like that. So I was kind of like a bit older than some of the other guys and girls there. But I was willing to work harder, so to speak. Like, I was willing. Everybody else is like, I'm going home. It's 5:00. I'm like, I'm staying. And I would go to every project and be like, do you need crunch tonight? And so I was that guy who was willing to go to them and say, oh, NHL needs to hit a deadline. I'm working on FIFA 06. I'm going to go work on NHL tonight. I'm going to work on Need for Speed. For me, it was a learning opportunity. So I was kind of one of those ones that was almost like perpetuating.
You were part of the problem, Billy.
I was, absolutely. And I think when I was younger, people were like, yeah, that's great. You're the young guy now. Because I was younger than some of the devs, but I was older than most of the QA at the time. And everyone was like, wow, okay, like you're working like, I think I worked like 92 days in a row at one point. And everyone's like, holy shit, you got to stop. And I was like, no, like literally what I will do is if I don't work tonight, if I don't work on the weekend, I'm going to go waste money and do stupid things. Or I'll be like, go drink the whole night away or whatever. Like, and you need that every once in a while as a release. But I was just like, I can be more productive if I do this. I can learn more. I can further my career. And that's that self-motivated, self-starter kind of problem, right?
Starbucks brings it up too, and I think this plays into a lot because I've heard this at a few of the really, really, really big companies. I don't want to say names, obviously, except for this Alex St. John guy. Fuck that guy. Do you think crunch can be retired as a necessary evil in the foreseeable future, or do you think there'll be enough passionate devs willing to crunch to keep feeding the phenomenon? And I actually know the answer to this one. There will always be enough passionate devs willing to feed that machine, because at one of the mega companies, I hear stories of it's the glorification. It's this badge of honor they're getting of being the first one into the studio.
Yeah.
And it's no longer about doing good work and being rewarded for how awesome your content is. It's about, oh yeah, I saw a billion at 7 a.m. And so I'm like, well,
I'll be 6:45.
I got up 6:45 now.
Yeah.
And then Billy comes at 6:30, and then you're staying longer.
Yeah.
You're not getting more work done. You're actually getting less work done.
A lot of times you're getting
Much
less or you're doing more, but it's not as high quality.
It's not the high quality. So it hurts on every single factor. So I think there will be definitely a billion of these passionate devs not wanting to crunch, but feeling that it is the way to do it and the way to get ahead and the way to impress your superiors or your peers even or whatever. But I think then it's our job as slowly getting to, seasoned devs or veteran devs to start pushing back and changing the culture of like, let's never do that crunch again by planning better, by focusing earlier, and teaching people coming into this industry that's like, don't put up with that bullshit. Like, what? Why would you ever do that?
I think a lot of it goes down to, because again, we've seen questions and points pop up about, well, is it because you were dumb? Like, were you just bad planners? Yes and no.
Yeah, that can be. Yeah.
Part of it is like you maybe don't have you work with the information you have available to you, right? And so I know even from past projects, someone would tell me afterwards, like, dude, I wish we'd known X, Y, or Z sooner, so that we wouldn't have had to crunch at the end or done this, or now like more and more teams are going to the idea of like crunch more frequently, but for less like sustained periods of time. It's like do like a couple days here and there every few weeks just to kind of knock out a feature, and then go back to your normal flow. And it's not great, but it's a little bit more sustainable than like the death march, right?
A little bit more sustainable, but then like I think the cost or the
cumulative
tax
effect,
will eventually hit her, but
it catches,
hit you later. Yeah.
I think, but a lot of this goes back to the idea of like, and I think we'll have to talk about this at some point, is what does a roadmap look like for a project? Like, and what are the phases? And a lot of times it's because depending on the title, for example, a sports title, which is annualized, it has a certain schedule, and again, it goes to, like, it starts usually with the time the sports season starts. So NHL will launch roughly the time the NHL season starts. Again, because you want to tie in to that hype. But they know roughly how much is iterative, how much is new, how much is, foundational cleanup. A larger title that's more of like a one-off or part of like a larger franchise. Like I don't want to speak to the other companies' experiences, but I can imagine like something like a BioShock title back in the day. BioShock 1 and 2, there's huge gaps between those. Then there's even BioShock Infinite had a large gap between it. And the pre-production phase of like, what are you building in some of these titles can be years. Some titles it's months. Like sometimes they're like, okay, like we're going to spend 3 months figuring out what new things we're going to do. Sometimes 2 titles ahead of time, right? Like some titles, if they're annualized, they might know, like it could be that the NHL team right now knows what NHL 19 has feature wise, because they got a roadmap of like how they're going to plan out all these things. And it's not because they're trying to hold things back from the fans, it's that they know they have to build back end tech for a number of years,
and they can only get so much done they obviously want to.
You have a year to get the next one ready.
Like I could see NHL ahead of time, having, right? Here's our list of awesome stuff we want to add to this game, and here's how much time it's going to take. Well, okay, let's start grabbing them. See
what's the highest
what
priority,
can go
right?
in next. Okay, now we got time for this one.
What's low hanging fruit? What's an easy one to drop?
And also
in,
with annualization, like the CODs or the NHLs and stuff like that. Well, actually, no, not with NHL. They do it differently. But with the CODs and the Assassin's Creeds, different studios make.
Yeah, they're alternating, right?
Game,
it's
so
different one each time.
It's not having to be in that crunch cycle, but it probably is.
You might be on a 3-year cycle, but because the way they stack is that your
one's
studio
getting released.
Yeah, so like Montreal's doing one, Shanghai is doing another, and say San Francisco's doing another one, and they're rotating, and that's.
So to you, it feels like one every year, but to them, they're making a game every 3 years,
right? And I think that's one of the ways that teams are solving some of that crunch stuff, of like, don't do it annually, get the full project cycle you want. It probably still had some crunch in there, honestly. Like
I think you can't get away from it. Like it's Michiel's talking about, like there might be like a 6-month dev. Like Death March is awful. It's like that's terrible planning. Somebody sucked, but the 2-week stuff is unavoidable. I think it needs to be that we need to get to a point where it's like the one day, because critical crash, that kind of stuff will be unavoidable. And
the reactive stuff, right?
Reactive stuff, but I don't think even the 2 weeks, I think, is really it's too hard.
The ultimate goal should be to get rid of it.
Ultimate goal should be 9 to 5 or 9 to 10.
Whatever
10
works
to 6,
for you.
whatever your thing is.
Yeah, but like I've always said, in my brain, the way I work, I'm a night owl. I would almost work best in a schedule where it's like 6 p.m. to 4 in the morning, and I would be at like peak performance the entire time. But like morning time, even like getting ready for the show, I'm like, like morning. And it's 4 coffees later.
It's the people work in different ways. But if you do this like 2 weeks, or say you work 3 weeks of normal, you were saying like 3 normal weeks, and then you do the crunch week, to kind of extend the burnout. You now are basing your velocity of a developer on bad data because they they had a week of 80 hours instead of 40, and so look, Bobby Joe can do like so much work, like let's get him to do that all the time, and it creates this expectation that the dev's suddenly feeling super stressed out about, because like, oh my god, they want me to do this all the time, I can't, like it costs me too much and stuff. But what other questions? I'm trying to find
if you guys want to throw some questions up in chat. I know I got some.
Oh, you got some from Starbucks.
One came up from Starbucks. I thought was
remember
really
you can tweet at us. You can tweet at ProducerHax or at Alien or at the Fids with any questions. Next week, do we have a topic yet?
I think we're gonna probably talk about just releasing a title and what that entails,
what it costs to release,
what the cost is in terms of like just manpower and
or maybe
effort, but also like what goes into like going. We used to do box copy games, right? And it was just ship and forget. And now it's.
Do you want to just talk about the end, or do you want to talk about what's pre-production?
I think
like go through
that might be
process?
That might be a bigger that might be like the whole walkthrough of like what does that look like. I think that's a big discussion, but I think releasing a title in this day and age, that might be a good. Maybe we have to cut our scope down. And
we have to cut our scope for next week. If you have any questions about what it
yeah.
takes to ship a game, the different phases, maybe we can go depending on what questions we get. We'll go through different options here. But yeah, you got a question from
Yeah,
Starbuck.
yeah.
What's up?
Starbuck was asking, what long-term effects do you think crunch has for affecting individuals as well as industry trends, so and company policies? So it touches a little bit on what we've been talking about today, but like the long-term effects are, again, like I point at this, I was in pretty good shape when I joined BioWare. When I was at EA, the same thing. I was a hockey player. I was took care of myself pretty well. I think I was like 198 pounds of muscle at that time. Now I'm more than that, and most of it's not muscle. It's the other part that lines the muscle, right?
We called it. It's called the BioWare 40.
It used to be the BioWare 20.
Now it's
the BioWare 40 for sure.
I put on 40 pounds.
Yep.
The 3 years of Dragon Age.
Well, and that's I was gonna say, like, coming off of Mass Effect 1, I went Mass Effect 1 into another project right away, and the other project was trying to sort itself out at that time. And coming off Mass Effect 1 and into the DLC and then into the PC port and everything that happened, or the PC project, it wasn't a port, it was actually like a full project. All that happened throughout. I joined in late 2006, and then we shipped in November 2007 for ME1, and then about another year of DLC and everything else went with it. During that time, by the time I joined that other project in 2008, I had put on 40 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's a year and a half to 2 years, 40 pounds of weight gain.
And it wasn't,
and that's not healthy at all, right? Like,
yeah.
That's 2 pounds a month roughly, more than that actually. It was bad. Or sorry, it's about 2 pounds a month I think is what I was averaging, and that's not good.
Yeah, no, and it's not just direct related to crunch or not crunch. I say that I gained that starting at DI, but I went from a very physically demanding job to now I'm sitting at a desk.
Yes, there's the effect of that,
and so my lifestyle didn't change to reflect that I'm not working out for what was
I went
technically
for that
8 hours a day.
I was eating good chicken meals and everything, good healthy meals, and playing hockey every day. Even when I was at EA, because I was doing crunch every night, but I was playing roller hockey at lunch and at dinner because I had a roller hockey court right there, and so that was part of it. But the crunch, if you're not careful. I know a lot of team members, Jeff talks about this a lot. He goes to like the gym and stuff like that, like supper breaks and stuff like that. You can offset it. Like, Casey on Mass Effect, he did a lot of crunch too with the dev team. He was one of those great producers and EPs that like was there. Mark did the same thing. Worked with the team, didn't go home just because, hey, night's done. If the team was crunching, he was there too. But
which
Casey keeps himself.
Yeah,
you hear sympathy crunch is a big thing, but a lot of folks keep themselves in great shape. I just became further to that, like that idea of like,
I like
saying
beer,
like,
burgers,
exactly, and you go to comfort foods and you go to like you do different things to offset
because
the
you're getting more stressed, right?
Yes,
so when I get stressed out, I want to go eat McDonald's.
Yeah,
and then I feel worse about myself. But it's so delicious.
It's a cycle, and you're like, oh, my griddle. And then they don't put the freaking egg and the cheese on it.
I think a point about that too is it perpetuates. To the question, it perpetuates bad data, because now you're what I said before. It's like you're expecting devs to be able to produce a certain amount of content now based on the fact that they were crunching, and so as an industry, we're like, no, we can get more done in a shorter time. Look what we just did on this last thing. It's like, we did that on that last thing, but it cost us that guy
and
or
that's
that girl,
actually,
or their sanity, or that kind of stuff.
That's a really good point, because I know you asked earlier, like, what's the cost of crunch to the project, and I think I was thinking more of like the timeline and everything else, but you're right, in terms of like, did you now start planning towards the velocity or that you had a sprint and you're like, hey, we did this amount. Well, it's because you were working twice as long. You're doing 16-hour, 12-hour days, and now you think you can get that much more done, when realistically you had to chop it down to what you were doing and average it out and then go, okay, no, like, this is the repeatable amount that we need to do. The danger part is that you go, we're not ready to cut scope. Sometimes you get to a point where you're like, we can't, and this is usually, I think, part of why crunch happens, is you get to that decision of like, what can you cut down to too late, or you get down to the bare bones, like, if we cut anything more, now we are affecting the product. Like, now if we cut anything else away, this is not a complete product for ourselves. We're not happy with the result. And that's where you go, okay, well, if this is the absolute bare minimum of what we have to ship, and assuming that you're not going to get everything right on the first time you put it in, you implement it, it needs to go through iteration. That's how crunch happens, right? So,
Cypher brought up a question. Can you talk about the interacting of fans and balancing that line between being in the industry and how folks treat you or how you interact with people? I think actually that's a great talk for another show.
Yeah,
I think we can turn that into a whole thing. Because fan interaction nowadays,
It's
I don't want to
changing,
derail
right?
this, but it's like we're always on. We're always on Twitter. We're always
Yeah.
on, and there's a very fine line that has to be treaded to
Yeah.
be careful, because you want to protect the company,
Yep.
but you also want to talk with fans and get their input. And
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll definitely. That'll be mine from 2 weeks from now.
Sometimes you accidentally turn on your stream for 32 minutes in the middle of the afternoon when a child presses buttons on a mouse. And you don't know. You don't know.
But yeah,
it's
no,
thing
that's a
nothing
great
is said,
topic,
right? So,
Cypher. I think we'll. I would love to do that one.
I think that deserves its
in
own
2 weeks.
show. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
So we'll do next week. We'll do
Yeah.
how to final a game, and then the week after that, we'll talk about fan and dev interaction.
Yeah.
I'll try to find some articles about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I have a lot of experience with it because I've always tried
Yeah.
to be pretty, and you as well. Obviously, we're streaming.
We're doing more of this
non-work
because of that,
related.
right? Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Building that relationship.
Yeah. So maybe we'll go with maybe one or two more questions, and we'll
Yeah,
start to wrap
I'm
up here,
just looking at one or two more questions. If you guys have anything about Crunch, with the effect on development,
Favorite Captain Crunch
favorite
flavor?
Captain Crunch flavor. Okay, that's one.
Berries, Crunch berries, right?
Classic.
Classic. Wow. Well, that's
I
pretty
like
old
it.
school, man.
Lots of milk.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You gotta get a balance of milk there,
Yep.
but yeah, Crunch berries. I don't know. Yeah. You gotta have it once in a while, right?
Yeah,
So,
why not?
It's like you have Fruity Pebbles all of a sudden in your Crunch berries.
I
you
have
know,
no
so-
problem being a child.
No, yeah, that's the greatest danger to my child is that they're being raised by a child. So
Classic skit. See, yeah, ergs with me.
yeah,
Anything else? Oh, probably where a lot of people demand a game be bugless. I think that's fair expectation though.
Yeah.
Just trying to see any. So last call for questions.
yeah,
Before
let's
we
see
shut
here.
it down.
Yeah. I think
Anything else you wanted to touch on, Billy?
I think it's really just again, people hear the word crunch, it triggers various reactions.
Yep.
It definitely has had that effect in the last couple of weeks as we get to, we've seen this article initially by Alex St. John absolutely triggered a lot of folks. Rami Ishmael had I think a great response.
Great response.
And the great part about that was that it was like you were reading the article and then his inline responses.
Inline
was
response
really great
because it was literally
yeah.
my thoughts as I read it.
Yeah, I was like,
and
holy
he
shit.
perfectly put
like,
it out there.
Nailed it, right? And and it's great to see someone that, obviously coming from a different perspective because
Yeah.
Rami is working in indie rather than AAA, but a lot of the same issues affect
I think it's
people,
across.
right?
And I think that's to Cypher's point of like, do you think people get out of AAA and go to indie because of the crunch thing? And I think I think it's everywhere.
I think they do. I've seen that a lot. I've seen a lot of friends that go, you know what, I'm done. Crunch was too hard on this project. I'm out.
Yep.
And then they go, but I still love making games. I want to make games. They go the indie route, and then they either end up back in AAA or they leave entirely because they just go, oh crap, you know what? Crunch is not unique to AAA. It's everywhere. And unfortunately, like we touched on earlier in the show, is that if you're working and you're just one person, 2-3 people,
it costs
there's
so much.
even more on you because and if you're not willing to scope way down, the fidelity of game you can make as an indie game generally tends to be lower than what you can make as AAA. And if you're not willing to sacrifice to go down to that, you're going to be working a lot of hours, and especially because, again, a lot of people ask like, what is budget? Like, oh, it's just because they were too cheap. They didn't want to spend more time, more money. Eventually, you have to release
Lazy game devs.
Yeah, lazy game devs. You have to release the game at some point for a couple of reasons. One, if it's like I always talk about like a sculpture or a painting. You see this a lot in like the Bob Ross paintings on Monday. It's like ruined.
Yeah.
If you keep going too far with
You
a
go too
painting,
far.
you eventually can ruin it. You can actually chop the arm off the statue because you were chiseling away too much. You accidentally put too much paint on the canvas and it just messes up. Oh god, we're gonna have to like turn that into a mountain. It was supposed to be a tree. You got to be really careful about like if you hold on something too long, you get too close to it, you can't see it anymore. You have to get it out there into the world and iterate on it. And that's I think why I like live services in games so much. But yeah.
To finish it up here, I think Winston Works has a great question. Do you think there's a connection between planning that leads to crunch and planning that leads to content cuts? And I think they're the exact same thing.
Same thing.
It's called poor planning.
It's and again, I think we have to be careful whenever we say poor planning because it makes it sound like we're dogging these people, right? And I think a lot of times you're working with the information you have at that time.
Yes.
And it's really important because I've seen this come up in a couple times like, are these people idiots? And we touched on this a little bit, but no, they're not
Absolutely
idiots.
not. Everybody's trying to make the best game possible.
I don't think there's any idiots at all in BioWare.
You wouldn't survive.
Like, or any studio
Yeah.
I've been in. Like, you can't be at these companies and be an idiot, right? You're there because you are
An expert
some of the
in your
best,
field.
or you're a subject matter expert. The problem is that you're dealing with a number of variables that have to come together, and the way games are made is like all these variables come together not by accident. It is grueling hard work.
Yeah.
Making games is hard. It's never been easy. It's getting more and more difficult. Like you said, right? It's we're at a weird crux now where the games are becoming more complex. The fidelity is going through the roof, and you have to be able to do that and boost your game year over year. Players are not willing to play what they played 5 years ago today, right?
Yep.
Like even when you go, I want to you want a remaster of a game. You don't want the game from 10 years ago because it won't hold up. You go play GoldenEye right now. I played it a few nights ago. It's not what I remember it as, right? Because your brain holds it in certain spots. So I think it's really important that we say everyone we work with, I nothing but incredible level of respect for. It's no one's an idiot in this industry. There are just, you work with what you have, and you have to.
That's the thing. So the initial planning, Winston Works, comes from like there's the initial plan for the project is a plan that has no crunch in it, right? And it's you're not planning to cut anything.
Yeah.
You have a plan based on the information you have at the beginning of a project before you start digging into that feature. I think that feature will take 20 days, and you start digging. You're like, whoa, but it needs these 17 other things below it.
Spiders out,
and they're each all 1 day. So now you've just doubled the scope of that feature.
Yeah. So it's a 40-day feature. Are we still okay with it? And usually you're not okay to make the decision on it. Are we still okay with it until much later?
And that's what I mean by poor planning. It's more so poor.
Dependency management, I think, right?
When the time comes to be like, holy cow, that feature, we're not going to fit anymore without an extra 40 days of work. Does the feature stay? Does it go? Do we just downscope the feature? Do we change the feature? How can we get that quality out of the game some other way instead of expecting people to crunch? Or I think that's it.
I want to leave it with a quick thought on like maybe something that a lot of people probably have had experience with, and I think relates back to something you can kind of digest more simply. A road trip. We always talk about road maps, and there's a reason for that. It's the idea of, I used to do these giant schedules for road trips. Actually, I did one last year when I met you guys down in Seattle for PAX. I was on sabbatical, and I wanted to get out of town. I wanted to go for a drive. That was my way to kind of recover some of just the effect of being busy for so long, and then saying, okay, like I need some time to separate, I need to go do these things, and one of the things I like to do is drive. But when you go do a road trip, you have to factor in, okay, so am I camping, am I staying in hotels? You allocate the cost based on it, you budget it out if you're really thinking ahead. Otherwise you come back and you're like, oh god, that credit card bill just got really crazy, right? And things that you don't have control over, which I discovered, were Canadian dollar tanked literally as I was traveling. It went from like being a certain value in relation to the American dollar to a lot less than that. And that happened on the Thursday I drove out. I stayed in Vancouver. Then there's other little things that happen, like, oh, you know what, the hotel I booked in Vancouver, they oversold the hotel because there was a convention, so I had to go to a different hotel. Now you're paying on the spot prices. Things like that happen.
And what you're talking about is like the money that you're adding and accumulating. That's the content scope creep
or iteration. And I had a certain budget of what I was willing to spend on that trip. And by the time I got to day 3 of what was supposed to be a 6-day trip, I was phoning my wife going like, I'm going to be coming home sooner than I thought. And I'm going to be scheduling emergency reactivity, essentially.
So that's cutting scope, right?
I chopped a day off at the back end of it. I stayed in a totally different hotel on the way back. I stayed in a motel because I was like, holy shit, that American dollar.
You're calling people who already have hotel rooms. You're like, can I stay the night?
Like, can I hang out with you? Because, that's how much the scope changed. And again, it's, you plan on what you know at the time, but like for example, when the American dollar and the Canadian dollar flux hit there, that changes. Like I went to a big hotel chain, right? So now they go, well, our rates just changed because our parent company in the U.S. says that we have to charge
Where's
this
the
amount.
mom and pop shop?
Yeah, exactly. And then the worst one is actually the gas. Gas was going through a weird thing. So again, you go on a road trip and you're thinking, oh, it's going to cost me X amount a liter or gallon if you're in the U.S. or wherever you are in the world. And that actually went up dramatically. I have a car that demands premium gas. So you're already paying a premium on that. And then you go, okay, well, that's fine. I'm used to paying this amount. It's good. And then all of a sudden I got to Vancouver. And then as I was heading into Seattle, I had to fill up as I was leaving Vancouver. The gas went up by about 30 cents a liter. that's like what just happened.
Yep.
It went from $1 to $1.30, and I was like, what do I do? Like that dramatically hit the amount I could do. So again, it was just, if you want an idea of like what happens to a game,
Yep.
think about that. If you've ever been on a road trip and how different things can factor in there, imagine that, but spread it across 3 years.
3 years, 200
people.
hundreds of millions of dollars or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah, whatever it might be, right? So
And I think to title
Patrick
back
saying off topic, I think
No,
Patrick missed the point.
It was right on topic.
Missed the point.
It's called an analogy.
Yes.
Pulling it all back to being a producer, I think that's where we need to help drive, whether it's your team or your project or industry, depending on what like your level, to not so much plan better, but be more reactive. And in my opinion, which is not everybody's opinion, is the ability to cut sooner.
Yes.
And to focus.
Know what
sooner.
you're willing to give up if need be.
Yep.
What the backup plan looks like.
And the pros and cons, right?
Yes,
Of cutting
yes,
this,
yeah,
but
yeah.
do I get this? But whatever, right?
You see that a lot. Scenario
Lots of
planning.
knock-on effects.
Here's best case, here's worst case, and finding that sweet spot
Yep.
of where you're happy with and what you're not, what you're willing to let go of, and what's like the like this thing stays with us front to back, right? So.
All right.
So with that, I think we'll
that's
call it, folks. Thank you so much. This was episode 3 of Producer Hacks. We're back every Sunday. We will update a little later in the week with where we are for next show. We're gonna have a bit of scheduling.
There's a bit of
things we have to
vacation
do.
stuff going on, so
Yeah.
we'll let you know when we're going live. But of course, it'll always be on the podcast, so you can tune in at any time. Highlight video on YouTube as well.
Yep.
So yeah, that's it for Producer Hacks Game Dev Podcast, where we talk games, the game industry, and Twitch and streaming and Billy.
Yes.
That's it.
Drinking Coke, apparently. Yeah. So thanks, folks. Hope you have a great day. And again, if you haven't already, make sure you go say hi or call your mom. Wish
Mother's
them a
Day.
happy Mother's Day.
Go love your mother.
And yeah. So take care, folks. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks. Just push the stop recording button.